Hey there, Kipsters. Mr. Piazza here. We're looking at objective 3C.2. It is on scale drawings, something from one of our later units in quarter 3, but definitely an important skill, having a lot to do with geometry. So the way that I'm going to teach is actually just by looking at the CST release items or the KC release items. And both these problems say use the scale to find the missing side. So these problems give you a scale, and you need to figure out how long is the piece of information that they're looking for. So I'll look at 114. This is a KC release question. The actual width of a rectangle is 18 centimeters. Use the scale of the drawings of the rectangle to find the actual length. So for this problem, I know that the actual width is 18 centimeters. And so far I can write that 1.2 centimeters in the drawing is the same thing as 18 centimeters in the real world. Just to kind of give myself a note. This is the measurement in the real world. This is the measurement in the drawing. And the way that I'm going to solve this problem is by writing a proportion that uses the other information I have. So I'm trying to find the distance of the actual length in the real world, but I know that the length in the drawing is 3.6 centimeters in the drawing. And so what I need to figure out is how many centimeters would that be in the real world. So I've written this proportion with 1.2 centimeters equals to 18 centimeters. That's my scale, equals 3.6 centimeters over x. And I'll solve this by cross multiplying and dividing as I would solve any other proportion. So step 1, cross multiply. I have 1.2x equals 18 times 3.6, or 18 times 3 6/10. If I do that, I have 1.2x is equal to, when I multiply, 64.8. And the next is to cancel the coefficient by dividing by 1.2, dividing by 1.2. And if I do, x equals 54. And that's just a matter of division. I can see that my answer is 54 centimeters. And if I put it back in, it should make sense that if something is 1.2 centimeters in the drawing, it's going to be 18 centimeters in the real world. So 3.6 centimeters in the drawing is going to be 54 centimeters in the real world. This is my answer. Another way you could have done this is also just by multiplying. In blue, 1.2 centimeters times 3 would get me 3.6. So 18 times 3 would get me 54. So I could have solved this using cross multiplication. I also could have solved this just by multiplying straight across. In either case, you see that the answer is 54. Now, I'd like you to try 61. Mr. Craig made a scale drawing of his office. You see the scale here, 1/2 inch equals 3 feet. So you'll definitely use that as your party proportion. And the width of the scale drawing of the office is 2 inches. What is the actual width in feet of Mr. Craig's office? Write a proportion for this problem, solve it, press play when you're ready to check your answer for the CST question. Okay, you've tried, so now it's time to check. First, you're using the scale in your proportion. You have 1/2 inch, that's the same thing as 0.5 inches, is the same thing as 3 feet. And then you need to use the other piece of information, which is, you want to know, that means 2 inches would be how many feet? A couple ways you could have done it. One is through cross multiplication. That's 0.5x equals 2 times 3, which is 6. If you divide by 0.5, divide by 0.5, it's actually going to get bigger. And x is equal to 12. And that should make sense if I put it back in the proportion. If 1/2 of an inch is 3 feet in the real world, that means 2 inches in the picture should be 12 feet. And so the answer you should have gotten would have been D. Okay, so we've looked at two examples where you have found the length of a missing side using a scale, but there's another skill involved with this. I'm just trying to figure out where to put this, which is actually figuring out the scale for a drawing. So here I have a drawing and it's going to give me some information, and I need to find the scale. And when it says find the scale, that means I want to know how much 1 inch or 1 unit would be. Since I see inches in this drawing, the goal is to figure out how many feet or meters or miles is 1 inch in the drawing. It's kind of like a unit rate. Kind of like finding the unit rate. So I'll do C, I'm then going to ask you to do D. Find the scale of the drawing if the actual length of the basketball court is 28.5 feet. So, I can see first that in the drawing, the length of the basketball court is 4 3/4 inches. That's the same thing as 4.75 inches. But in the real world, the problem is telling me that that's 28.5 feet. And so my goal is to figure out, knowing that, how many feet would 1 inch be? And so that means 1 inch equals X feet. And this is the proportion I'll write. I'm using all the information I have from the drawing, 4.75 inches and 28.5 feet. And I wrote a proportion that's essentially asking me to figure out how many feet is in 1 inch. In order to do that, I will solve it by cross multiplying and dividing. This is 4.75x equals 28.5 times 1, which is just 28.5. Then I divide by 4.75. 4 75/100ths, divide by 4.75. And I know that x, this divides evenly. It goes in evenly 6 times. And so what that's saying is that the scale for this drawing, I'll circle it in green, is that 1 inch is the same thing as 6 feet. At least according to C. So usually the scale is the same no matter what in that drawing. If we look at a different dimension, the scale will still be 1 inch is the same thing as 6 feet. I'd like you to try D, which actually is going to give you a different scale. So stop the video here, find the scale assuming the actual width of the basketball court is 12.5 feet, and then press play once you figured out what the scale for that D is. Okay, you've tried D, now it's time to check. Looking at this picture, you can see that the width in the drawing is 2.5 inches, which is the same thing as 2.5 inches. In the real world, the problem tells you that that's the same thing as 12.5 feet. And so what you're trying to figure out is how many feet would 1 inch be? And that's the proportion you should have written. You cross multiply and divide. 1 times 12.5 is just 12.5 equals 2.5 times x. And then you divide. Divide by your coefficient of 2.5, divide by your coefficient of 2.5, and x equals 12.5 divided by 2.5, which I believe goes in evenly 5 times. And so for this second one, for D, what that's actually telling you is that 1 inch is equal to 5 feet. And that's the scale you should have had for D. At this point, I feel comfortable that you're ready for independent practice, reviewing the 2 skills of finding the missing side and finding the scale. So I'd like you to complete these 5 problems. In problems 1 through A through C, you need to find the missing length using that scale of 1 inch is equal to 2.5 feet. And in problems D through E, you need to find the scale for each drawing. So it's giving you some information, and you need to figure out how many feet would be equal to just 1 inch. If you're successful on these, you should be ready for objective assessment 3C.1. 3. Good luck.